It started with a French breakfast. Jonathan Matthews sat at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee, staring blankly at the morning news. Tina, his wife, was flipping through her phone, and Emily, their teenage daughter, was scrolling through something on her tablet. The house was ordinary in every way, familiar, a little messy, a little lived in, but something was amiss, though no one had noticed it yet. "Is this thing broken?" Jonathan suddenly asked. Tina didn't look up. "What?" "My coffee mug." Jonathan turned it in his hands, squinting at the words printed on the side. "It says, La vie est belle. What happened to best dad ever?" Tina finally looked up, brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "That's the mug you bought at the airport last week. Best dad ever. I saw you grab it this morning." Jonathan shook his head, looking confused. "I swear it was best dad ever. Look, it even has the Eiffel Tower on it now." Emily looked over the rim of her tablet. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked in that dry, teenage way that suggested this was just another day in the Matthews family circus. But before Jonathan could answer, their cat, Mr. Fluffykins, jumped up onto the table, tail flicking lazily. Jonathan jumped back, eyes wide. The cat was floating. "Emily, is the cat, is he?" Jonathan trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. Emily put down her tablet, squinting. Yeah. He's hovering, like, 3 inches off the table. And I think I just saw him wink at me." Jonathan reached out for the floating cat, but as his hand neared, Mr. Fluffykins meowed in perfect English. "Hey, buddy, could you not grab me? I'm busy floating, okay?" Tina finally put down her phone. "What the hell?" The moment was interrupted by the sound of a loud pop in the air, like a bubble bursting. The mug in Jonathan's hand flickered, the words on it shifting. "Now," it said, "world's best lover." "Okay, I'm officially freaked out now," Jonathan muttered. Meanwhile, the news on the TV continued to blare on in the background. A reporter spoke with a sense of urgent calm. "And in related news, strange reports are flooding in from across the country, with millions of people experiencing, well, frankly, time distortions. People are waking up in places they didn't go to sleep, finding themselves speaking languages they've never studied, and even this one's a first discovering that their dogs are suddenly singing operas. Experts believe this may be the start of a much bigger phenomenon," and the screen flickered, cutting to a scene of someone in New York City wearing 18th-century clothing, holding a large baguette and shouting at passers-by. "All of you have forgotten that Napoleon was the true hero of Europe." Tina turned to Jonathan. We're not going crazy, right?" Jonathan stared at the cat, who was now licking its paws in midair. "I'm beginning to think that maybe we are. Or maybe the world is." It wasn't just Jonathan's family. Everywhere, people were experiencing the same weird glitches, only they weren't aware that the whole world was slowly slipping through a temporal crack. The virus, the quantum flu, as scientists would later call it, had begun spreading across the world, seeping into the very air they breathed, twisting time itself. Dr. Simon Voss was the first to see the pattern. A brilliant, but slightly off-kilter physicist, he had been studying quantum particles for years, hoping to unlock the secrets of the universe. But when the world began shifting in strange ways, he found himself confronted with a problem that no amount of scientific theory could explain. The particles weren't just unstable. They were alive. He was in his lab when the first real anomaly hit him. He had been observing a set of particles under a microscope when the air around him seemed to buzz. His coffee cup, an old, chipped ceramic one with a faded university logo, began to vibrate, and the logo flickered. One moment, it said, Yale. The next, it read, UCLA. Then it shifted again to Harvard. Dr. Voss blinked, rubbed his eyes, and checked the calibration on his instruments. Nothing was wrong. But the cup was still changing, and as he reached for it, his hand passed through a bubble of distorted space. "What the hell?" he muttered. He stepped back, panic beginning to settle in. He wasn't supposed to be seeing this. This was impossible. He turned, his eyes darting toward his colleagues, but the lab was empty. Everyone else had left for lunch. He rushed to the door, but before he could reach it, the wall beside him shifted, flickering between two different versions of itself, one with peeling paint and the other freshly painted. His head spun. There was something wrong, deeply wrong, with time itself. By the time Dr. Voss called his colleague, Dr. Lina Garcia, it was clear that this wasn't just a local issue. News reports were pouring in from across the world, showing people experiencing similar time distortions. It wasn't just objects changing shape, people were acting differently too, Lina answered after 2 rings. Simon, I just saw something that, he cut her off. I know. I've been seeing it too. It's happening everywhere. It's not just some weird freak accident. This is a virus. A quantum virus. Lina's voice was tense. A virus? A virus that messes with quantum states? Dr. Voss nodded even though she couldn't see him. Exactly. And it's spreading faster than we thought. It's in the air, Lina. It's in everything. The flu isn't just messing with people's health. It's messing with reality itself. People are getting sick, but they're also losing their grip on time. Their thoughts are fractured, their memories fading in and out. Some people are even forgetting how to exist in their own timelines. Lina went silent for a moment, then said, That's insane. Tell me about it. We need to figure out where it came from. And how to stop it. Meanwhile, in an upscale Manhattan penthouse, Dr. Evan Carter, self-proclaimed expert in time travel theory, though most considered him a charlatan, was sipping wine and watching his favorite historical drama on TV. It was only when the show suddenly cut to a scene from 2050, his future, that he realized something was very wrong. The scene in the show featured a strange, metallic virus being unleashed into the atmosphere, visibly distorting people's memories and actions, bending reality like a broken mirror. Wait a minute. Carter muttered, looking closer. That's my lab. That's me. His heart raced as the familiar face of Dr. Voss appeared on screen, standing next to a team of scientists, the familiar glitchy air around them, as they stared at some kind of strange particle bomb. The subtitles were in French, but he could understand them perfectly. They're not supposed to see this, the on-screen Dr. Voss said. But it's the only way to stop them. We have to send it back. The broadcast cut off, leaving only static. Carter's mind reeled. He needed to find Dr. Voss, and quickly. The quantum flu was no longer just a curiosity. It was a crisis. It was time itself, unraveling at the seams, and no one was prepared to deal with it. Dr. Voss, Lina, and Evan, along with an unlikely team of physicists, historians, and even a couple of conspiracy theorists, were about to embark on the most bizarre and dangerous adventure of their lives, to track down the origin of the quantum flu, travel across time, and stop it before the world knew. The universe disappeared entirely. The quantum flu spread like wildfire, though no one truly understood how or why it was happening. Reality itself had begun to warp, like a poorly stitched quilt, and people were waking up in entirely wrong timelines, speaking in languages they'd never learned, eating foods they'd never liked. Even the air felt off, crackling with a strange electricity, as though time itself was holding its breath. Dr. Simon Voss knew this wasn't some freak accident. He'd seen the early signs: coffee mugs changing logos, strange, flickering shadows across his lab, objects behaving as if they were in 2 places at once. But when he learned that the quantum flu was a weapon, a virus engineered to alter the timeline by a civilization from the future, everything shifted. The virus wasn't just a biological anomaly, it was a temporal anomaly, one that could unravel everything: history, memory, reality. We need to figure out where this virus came from, Voss muttered as he pored over his data, his mind racing. And we need to stop it before it's too late. Lina Garcia, a quantum theorist and his closest collaborator, was no stranger to paradoxes, but this one was unlike anything she had ever encountered. The moment she stepped into Voss's lab, she felt the strange air humming with a low, unidentifiable frequency. It was almost like the world was skipping beats. "Simon," Lena said, her voice tense. "Have you heard the reports? People are changing timelines mid-sentence. One moment they're in Paris, the next they're in the Middle Ages. It's happening everywhere." Voss nodded, running his hand through his hair. "It's not just a virus. It's a virus infecting time itself. The particles in the air, they're destabilizing people's very sense of self. Their minds are losing track of time, and their bodies are physically warping. They're becoming versions of themselves from different points in time." Lena shook her head in disbelief. "Are we really saying this is intentional? A virus from the future?" "Yes," Voss replied, though his voice faltered with uncertainty. "A virus designed to correct history. To adjust the timeline in favor of a future civilization, one that's manipulating time like it's a plaything. They think they can reset the future by making subtle changes in the past, erasing entire versions of history that don't serve them." Lena stared at him, her mind struggling to catch up. "And we're supposed to stop them?" "We have to," Voss said, his eyes narrowing. "The future has sent this virus back in time, and we're at the epicenter. If we don't find the source, time will collapse into a single version, their version, and everything we know will be erased." It was then that Evan Carter walked in, with the swagger of someone who thought he knew exactly what was going on, though in reality, he rarely did. A self-proclaimed time travel expert, Carter was an academic in the sense that he had read every time travel novel ever written and thought that was enough to qualify him for the task. But despite his cocky attitude, he wasn't stupid. He could tell something was off the moment he stepped into Voss's lab. "Are we really doing this?" "Time travel, I mean," Carter said, eyeing the screens flashing with patterns of destabilizing particles. "Seems a little dramatic, even for you, Simon." "This is no joke, Carter," Lena snapped, her patience already wearing thin. "The future has already started rewriting itself. We're not in a science fiction novel." Carter raised an eyebrow. "Then explain why the news just broadcasted a clip of me sitting on my couch, watching the news in 2050. He pulled out his phone, tapping through the footage. Sure enough, there he was sitting, looking confused, watching a clip of a future newscaster talking about quantum viruses, with Dr. Voss's face on the screen. Voss froze. That's impossible." "No, it's not," Carter said with a grin. "Apparently, it's all real. You're in the future too, Simon." Lena frowned, but Voss's mind was already racing, the pieces falling into place. If Carter was appearing in his own future broadcast, then it was more than just a virus infecting time. It was sending signals back, constructing fragments of future memories in the present. This virus isn't just rewriting people's memories. It's pulling people from their own timelines, creating fragments of alternate realities. "We need to stop it," Lena said firmly, her voice tinged with urgency. "We need to find where it started." And that's when Voss had the idea. If this virus is coming from the future, then we need to go to the source. We need to track it down through time. The virus was sent, and if we can find where and when it was unleashed, we can stop it from spreading. "You're talking about time travel," Carter said, raising an eyebrow. "And last I checked, none of us have that ability." "No, we don't," Voss said, glancing at Lena. "But I know someone who might." They weren't sure where to start, but there was a place to go, a lab in a future city where time travel had been perfected. According to Carter's somewhat dubious understanding of quantum mechanics, it wasn't just any lab, it was a place where time itself had been twisted, where experiments had gone wrong. Dr. Voss's work in the past had been part of the blueprint for those experiments. The team gathered what little equipment they could, a few scientific instruments, a couple of computers, before embarking on their journey. The timeline would be unstable, they knew. There would be paradoxes, disjointed realities, and most likely a few near-death experiences. But they had no choice. Time itself was on the line. They stepped into the time chamber, a strange, dimly lit room filled with glowing blue tubes and metal scaffolding, and activated the device. A shimmering wave of energy rippled through the air, distorting their surroundings. Voss felt his stomach lurch, as if the ground beneath him were vanishing, replaced by something darker, more alien. The particles of the air seemed to bend, reshaping themselves, collapsing into new timelines, creating new histories. When they landed, the world around them was different. Not quite the world they knew, but not entirely unfamiliar. They stood in the middle of a bustling, futuristic city, but the sky above them was a sickly orange, and the streets hummed with the strange hum of technology. It was as if the future had been rewritten, and they had arrived at the very moment the virus was unleashed. "Welcome to the future," Carter muttered, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "Or, you know, a version of it." Voss felt a chill crawl up his spine as he looked at the twisted skyline, the skyline that shouldn't exist. It wasn't just the future, it was their future, reshaped by the virus. "We need to find the source," Lena said. "And fast." They made their way through the city, careful not to draw attention to themselves, but it was clear that something wasn't right. People moved through the streets with a detached, robotic efficiency, their faces blank, their eyes too still. This was a society built on control, where time itself was no longer linear, it was fractured, splintered, and manipulated. They found their way to the lab, a sprawling, sleek building at the heart of the city, glowing with a faint blue light. The moment they stepped inside, the air around them shifted again, bending with a hum that vibrated through their bones. A computer screen flickered to life in front of them, displaying an urgent message: "Warning, temporal anomaly detected. All timelines in danger of collapse." "It's here," Voss said, his voice tight with dread. "The virus, this is where it started." But as they moved deeper into the facility, they encountered something even worse. A group of people, their bodies writhing in pain, their faces contorted in fear, caught in the throes of the virus. They were becoming versions of themselves from different timelines, flickering in and out of existence. Some were in the past, some in the future, but all were trapped in the moment of collapse. Lena stepped forward, eyes wide. "We need to stop this before it spreads further. This is just the beginning." Suddenly, a voice echoed through the lab, cold and mechanical: "You are too late. The timeline has already been rewritten." From the shadows emerged a figure, someone they all recognized. It was Dr. Voss. Or rather, a future version of him, cold and detached, his face hollow with the weight of centuries. He stepped forward, a dark smile creeping across his lips. "Welcome to the future, Simon," the figure said. "I'm afraid it's too late to stop it now." The figure who stepped from the shadows was a chilling, yet familiar sight. It was Dr. Simon Voss, or, at least, a version of him from a future that hadn't quite happened yet. His eyes were distant, his face pale as though he hadn't seen the light of day in years. His lab coat hung on him like a ghost's shroud, the sleeves rolled up to expose pale, trembling wrists. He looked like someone who had already seen the end of time and didn't care anymore. "Welcome to the future, Simon," the future Dr. Voss said, his voice low, almost a whisper, as if the words were too heavy for his mouth to carry. "I'm afraid it's too late to stop it now." Lena stepped forward first, her gaze flicking between the two versions of Voss. "You," she said, her voice hard, "you're the one who started this. You're the one who's been manipulating time with this virus." The future Voss didn't flinch. In fact, he almost smiled. A twisted, knowing smile that sent a cold shiver through Lena's spine. "Started? No. I didn't start it. I finished it." He raised a hand, motioning around the room as if to indicate the city outside, the fractured timelines that stretched like broken glass. "Time is no longer a singular path. It never was. It's a tangle, a mess. A perfect, controlled chaos. I'm simply the one who showed the world how to harness it." You think this is control? Dr. Simon Voss's voice shook with disbelief. This is madness. Control? The future Voss's smile widened, though his eyes never left their faces. Madness is a word for people who don't understand what's really going on. It's the word people use when they're afraid of the truth. You should have seen the future before I rewrote it. We rewrote it. History was a story that didn't need to be told. So, I told a new one. A better one. Lena stepped forward, her face a mix of anger and disgust. By destroying everything we know? By freeing it, the future Voss corrected. You think this world is fragile? This timeline is nothing more than one possibility among many. The virus is nothing more than a tool, a means to an end. A tool to collapse all the versions of reality that aren't worth saving. So, what happens now? Carter asked, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. You kill the rest of us, too? The future Voss turned his gaze toward Carter, his eyes glinting coldly. You? No. You're irrelevant. But your timeline? Your reality? It's over. It's already too late. You should have stayed in your nice, neat, linear existence. But now. He paused and looked around at them. You've seen too much. You've crossed over into the future. You're part of the new timeline now. What do you mean by that? Lena demanded. The future Voss's smile deepened. I mean you're going to help me. You're going to help me finish what we started. Dr. Voss's brow furrowed. I'll never help you. I'll stop this. You've corrupted everything. You've turned time into a playground. Oh, Simon, the future Voss said, his tone almost patronizing. You haven't learned anything. Time is a playground. It always was. But I can teach you how to play. If only you'd stop resisting. The air around them thickened, vibrating with an unsettling hum. The walls flickered again. Objects, people, places, and for a moment, reality itself seemed to pause. Every second stretched, then snapped back, warping into a new version of what had been. Lena clenched her fists, the situation spiraling into something impossible. So, what do we do now? How do we stop you? The future Voss stepped closer, his eyes glinting with an unreadable expression. You don't stop me. You can't. But you can help me stop the virus from tearing everything apart. The words hit them like a punch to the gut. What do you mean? Carter asked, his voice tightening. You're the one who's spreading it. You're the one who's. I didn't spread it, the future Voss interrupted, holding up his hand. I contained it. The virus, it wasn't meant to go this far. But the collapse, it's spreading faster than I anticipated. It was supposed to end with a controlled reset. I was supposed to fix things, to set history on the right track. But now, I don't know if that's possible anymore. There was a long, heavy silence as the group absorbed his words. The future Voss, his future self, was as much a prisoner of this new world as they were. He wasn't in control anymore, not even of his own plan. Voss shook his head slowly, as though the enormity of the situation was just beginning to sink in. You didn't just send a virus back in time. You're telling me you broke the timeline. You tore holes in it. The future Voss nodded solemnly. Yes. And it's spreading faster than we can fix it. At first, it was an experiment. A small push, small adjustments to history. But the virus, Simon, it was never just meant to infect people. It infected time itself. Now everything is collapsing. The past, the present, the future, they're all merging. Time itself is becoming liquid. And I'm stuck here, trying to fix what can't be fixed. Lena narrowed her eyes. So, you want us to help you undo it? But you're the one who started it all. Yes, the future Voss said, without hesitation. Because, as much as I wish I could, I can't fix it alone. This is where you come in. You've seen the timeline, Simon. You're the one who can stop the virus from completely unraveling reality. You're the key. I'm no key, Voss said, his voice sharp. You're just trying to manipulate me. You're the one who's responsible for all of this. No, the future Voss replied, his voice suddenly soft and tired. I'm not. I was responsible. But I see now that it was never supposed to go this far. I thought I could fix everything by changing time, by making the world better. But I was wrong. I see that now. And the virus, it's beyond me. It's beyond any of us. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier, charged with an almost palpable weight. Outside, the city hummed, but there was no sound, no life. The fracture in time had done more than distort reality, it had killed it. What can we do? Lena asked, her voice quiet, but filled with an unmistakable determination. We need to stop the source, the future Voss said, stepping aside to reveal a strange, glowing device. It hummed with an unnatural energy, its surface pulsating with light. This is the heart of the virus. The device that's controlling the distortion. Lena moved toward it, her eyes narrowing as she examined the strange machinery. How do we destroy it? You can't destroy it, the future Voss said. You have to reverse the signal. Send it back to the beginning. Send it before it ever reached this point. You have to reset it. Reset time to the way it was before I made my first change. It was a terrifying thought. They would have to go back, all the way to the beginning, to the moment the virus had first been unleashed. To the point before the first fracture in time. But if they did, everything that had happened since would be erased. Everything they'd just experienced. Every person they'd met, every memory of this version of the world would be wiped out. Voss hesitated, then looked at Lena. Do you understand what we're about to do? I understand, Lena said. But we don't have a choice, do we? The future Voss nodded. No. There's no other way. They prepared to execute the final plan, but as the countdown began, there was one final, eerie moment of stillness. The reality around them flickered one last time, the walls shaking, the future Voss looking almost human. The darkness that had overtaken the city, the universe, seemed to hold its breath as they stepped into the light, and then, as the final reset was triggered, everything disappeared.